So we'll go ahead and open this special board meeting with Sheila doing the roll call.
Olson? Olson?
Here.
D. Peterson?
Here.
J. Peterson? Swaysinger?
Here.
Boss Ward?
Here.
All right.
Okay. So we have no minutes to approve from the last meeting at this meeting. I don't recall doing the Pledge of Allegiance, but it is on our agenda.
That's all right. Thank you.
Are there any changes to the agenda for this morning's meeting?
None.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Tim and Carol. All in favor of approving the agenda as published, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion is, or the agenda is approved. Conflicts of interest? I have none.
This is Carol. I have none. This is
None
Rachel.
for
I have
Tim.
none.
None for Tim.
Okay. So that brings us, we have no old business, and our new business update on COVID and changes to the return to school plan. Mr. Albert.
Yes, thank you. Again, thanks everybody for being able to meet this morning. Really just have a brief update. Once again, are doing really well here in school. Last week we were down again to 7 active cases, which is really good. We're still waiting for that potential surge from Thanksgiving, which will probably occur this week if it's going to occur as a result of the Thanksgiving break. But most importantly, we wanted to update you on the most recent CDC guidelines, which were announced last week, which will alter the 14-day quarantine to a 10-day quarantine for students that are considered a close contact exposure, which is good news. Obviously, if they're still asymptomatic, then all the normal things that have always been part of the CDC program. And then the opportunity for students and staff that are still asymptomatic and choose to take part in either the molecular or the antigen tests could reduce their 10-day quarantine to a 7-day quarantine if they're asymptomatic and continue to do their normal measures with monitoring their symptoms, of course, for the remainder of the 14 days. So, and Amy is here, of course, so in case we have any questions or if there's any other discussions on that. Rachel, we talked with Rachel from the Sanford Clinic on last week and talked a little bit about the district's response to this particular plan and potentially a district response if we were to see another surge of students that were COVID positive in our community. So we felt really good about that. Also, Rep. Anna from the Vermillion Medical Clinic was part of that discussion as well. So we got a really good discussion on having our handle on what happens if our students or our staff become ill in larger numbers than we expect. But more importantly, we talked about this concept of reducing and following the CDC guidelines. So my ask today is that we have that discussion and that we consider moving to the new CDC recommended guidelines of going down to 10 days and then allowing us to consider using our rapid tests here from the district to allow students that are asymptomatic to come back after 7 days on day 8. And part of our plan, of course, would be that if we do find an asymptomatic candidate that fits that profile and they would like to come in and have themselves tested, we can use our antigen test, our rapid test. Amy and her crew are available to set up a little bit of a testing operation from the middle school where we could bring those folks to the middle school and have them tested on day 7. And then if they are still asymptomatic and a negative test and we want to follow the CDC guidelines, then we'd be allowed to let them return to school on day 8. Our protocol would be to continue to measure them in school, monitor them with day 8, 9, and 10 with their close contact exposures, with temperature checks and all the things that we're always doing. And we'd ask them to continue to monitor their own symptoms at home through day 14 as required for or requested from the CDC. So that's really the discussion we'd like to throw out there for you today. So, Amy, Rachel, you were part of that discussion. Anybody else have something to add or have questions, importantly? And thinking of them, maybe I guess just the obvious benefit that we're seeking today is that we would be being able to find a way to get students that are asymptomatic back to school sooner, which is obviously our biggest concern. So we're really excited with the opportunity that the CDC has altered their recommendations down to 10 days and the option of going down to 7. So that's what we're here about today. So
This is Rachel. Can you hear me?
yes.
I definitely think it's great moving to the CDC recommendations. I personally cannot agree to being testing out with the antigen test versus a PCR test, but that's something that the group can decide. But I will go with what Sanford standards are, where you cannot test out of quarantine with an antigen.
Yeah, that's something we discussed. Yeah, Rachel made last week that Stanford has got a set of standards that that PCR test is a more reliable potentially test for this type of event. We're just following basically that the CDC and the Department of Health have said that we could use antigen tests even if they're not quite as reliable. So that was really what our discussion was based on. So
Is a 10 to 30% false negative when you're testing asymptomatic people. So
We do have the ability to do the PCR tests. I mean, we have the ability to do the higher quality tests.
we don't, Carol.
I said a yes and a no.
Yeah. Yes, the hospital settings do have that ability. No, the school doesn't have the ability. The tests that we receive from the Department of Health are antigen tests. They're if you're positive, they're pretty reliable. But there is the false negative option, and we've experienced that in our district as well, where we've had false negatives, and a few days later they've tested again and been positive. So we've experienced that. So we would have the option to do multiple tests if we chose to with our students. If we did it on day 7 and it was negative, we could bring them back again on day 9. And but we're hoping that really that we're using those other symptom checks to catch somebody who would be potentially still carrying this virus and be ready to transmit it to others. We're hoping that our other mitigations would catch that. But again, there's no guarantee it would.
I have a question that maybe Rachel or Amy can answer. Is the false negative rate due to test error, or is it due to the actual sensitivity of the antigen test as opposed to the PCR test?
I think that there's a lot of factors. I think it is a very sensitive test. It has to be done in a certain way, in a certain time frame. I mean, there's room for error there. And also, they have kind of said that this particular antigen test is more indicative of like your whether you're infectious versus whether you're positive. So we've had a fair amount of false negatives on people who are actually symptomatic. And Rachel's right, the package insert does recommend this test to be used for symptomatic, not asymptomatic people. But when the CDC kind of gave out these guidelines, they did include antigen testing. And I think I did look up the data, I'm not sure what it is, but on day 7, I think the percentage of people that might be positive from a COVID exposure is fairly low anyway. This particular antigen test might catch, 5% of a positive, where I think the PCR is like 8. I mean, there's definitely a percentage, but it's not super significant. I didn't find when I looked it up, but by all means, you guys go ahead, because I know you're good at data.
Well, yeah, but these numbers aren't making it an easy decision. 5 to 8% is not doesn't sound great. Now, I was asking because if it's truly just an error, a testing error, then repeat testing would drop your false negative rate. But if it's the sensitivity of the test, then it doesn't matter whether I test on day 6 or 7. If I test both, I'm negative both times because I don't know enough about the mechanism. Okay.
I think the thought that we had to go along with that too, Doug, is if we were using this test to, I guess, to get our kids back into school, we would then also put them on our sort of in-school quarantine or in-school monitoring to also monitor their symptoms and their temp while they're coming back. Sort of, I don't know, let them test back in, but also under the understanding that we know that that's not a one and done, you're negative, you're good to go. You know, we still had thought it would be a good idea to, you know, keep tabs on those kids, just because we know there's some error with that test.
So ultimately, today's discussion is that, just that, which is that we would like the board to allow us to write an amendment to the return to school plan, which basically says we'll follow the new CDC guidelines of 14 down to 10 days quarantine for asymptomatic exposures, and then consider allowing us to take and use our antigen tests as a way to get from day 10 to day 7 with continued monitoring, and to let those students get back in. I think our students and our staff are pretty clear they want to be in school. And once again, the infectious rate at school, particularly in the elementaries, is very, very small. And the middle school, high school, it's a little greater, of course, but this is just another way to get our folks back to school in a safe way and try to keep them monitored. But that's really what we want to talk about today. And so we would entertain a motion that would allow us to do that, or one of two of those things, or none of those things, I guess would be what we would like to get this morning. So,
Doug, can you put that out into 2 different motions?
Yeah, I think we should. So let's start with the reduction from 14 to 10. Because I don't think I heard any objections to that when I polled people on Friday. But I'll let the individual board members speak well, or make the motion.
I'll make the motion.
So the motion is to reduce the close contact quarantine from 14 days to 10 days. And Tim, or everyone, are we understanding that to mean that 14 days, if you're a close contact outside of school, at 10 days, you can now come back into the building. And if you're an in-school close contact, your in-school protocol ends after 10 days also?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
I moved and seconded to adopt the CDC guidelines of reducing the quarantine period for close contacts. So that's not a change in quarantine for positive cases, just close
Correct.
contacts.
right.
From 10 days, or from 14 days to 10 days. Any further discussion on that motion?
Carol.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor of this change to the return to school plan signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Oh. Abstain. Motion passes.
Nobody did. All 4.
Okay, so second item would be the use of the rapid test or the antigen test to reduce from 10 down to 7. This is, I think we have some more discussion. Amy, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what's your recommendation as our school health official?
To be honest, when we started with this test, it does say to be used for symptomatic students only, and I was kind of against it being used in a screening purpose. But at this time, I feel like we have been given all of these tests. We have hundreds of them. The CDC has okayed an antigen test. Now, I know Rachel said that Sanford has not okayed it, but the CDC has tentatively okayed every antigen test. So if we say, well, a kid can come back with an antigen test from somewhere else, but not ours, then how do we know they're not going to Walgreens and getting this very same test? and coming back with it. I mean, we don't know what other places are using. And I feel like if we have the tests, if we're able to utilize them in an efficient way to get our kids tested, to keep them monitored, and to get them back in school, I feel like it's worth a shot. Having said that, I do want us to, you know, I guess walk carefully, take baby steps, you know, watch our students. If we do approve this testing to be utilized, that we are, you know, watching the outcomes and are ready to kind of pull it back if we're finding that it's not working the way we want it to work. I guess that's how I feel about it, but you know, I'm totally open for discussion. I just feel like we have a lot of these tests and I'm not super confident to even use them for symptomatic people because we've had some false negatives with that too. But if we can utilize these tests according to the South Dakota Department of Health and the CDC to get our kids back in school, I feel like I'm willing to give that a shot.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, the testing would have to occur at what point in the quarantine? Around day 7, or at day 7?
Between day 5 and day 7, it has to be at day 5 or later, up to day 7, or you know, day 8, 9 if you want to just get them back a day early, but it has to be after day 5.
Okay. And is there a false positive rate? I'm thinking about how we might be able to use these in other ways.
There is about 3 to 6%.
Oh, so it's relatively low.
You kind of
Okay.
got to go with common sense. They have symptoms, which you're probably not going to be using that to test them out of quarantine, but yes, there is.
Okay. But in terms of other uses, that's good to know. Okay.
So that's a good thing you said there, Rachel, just as I keep trying to think through this. So Amy, we would not use it if they are symptomatic. This would not be the test to get them out of quarantine. It's only those asymptomatic students or staff after day 5.
Yes, the test is intended to be used for symptomatic, which is what what is a little bit tricky about this. I mean, in the package insert, it says for symptomatic, but with the fact that it's classified as an antigen test and that the CDC has essentially approved it, it kind of puts us in this territory where could we potentially catch positives that are asymptomatic? I think absolutely we can, and that would be the goal of this. Is it the most accurate, precise test to do that? It's not the most accurate and precise test, but I think that it can be utilized for that. Now, if we had a situation where, you know, at this point, we've been using them for symptomatic staff, we have not been using them for symptomatic students, just because I feel like it just opens a lot of doors of, you know, having people coming to school sick, having not super reliable tests, that kind of thing. But we may potentially use it in a symptomatic case if we had the availability to do it. But right now, I think primarily we're looking at utilizing these hundreds of tests that we have to get our kids back in school.
Okay.
And
And
also-
I should know this, but we haven't had to pay for the tests.
Nope, we haven't had to pay for them. The state has provided them. They've provided kind of just a little bit of training to us. They provided all the materials and the PPE to be used to administer the tests as well.
Okay. And then if our quantity or supply dwindles, we would have to obviously revisit this then, correct?
Yes, and there's possibility with the state, they may have more tests for us to get more if we were utilizing them. Many schools are not utilizing them. So there could be potential for more, but yeah, we may run out and need to revisit it too.
Okay.
We did call the state, and Amy and I visited with them on last week, and we are getting another shipment of tests in because we are one of the schools that are using them. So when they see that we're using them, they send us more. But they also do expiration dates. And so we do have some that are on our shelves now that could expire if we weren't to use them, which is, like I said, no problem of ours because we didn't pay for them, but it's just the fact that we have these resources that do have a shelf life that we would like to use and be as part of our program to get kids back to school. So, and once again, this is not to get any sick kids or staff back to school. This is, our kids and our staff that are positive are out for their entire quarantine. There's no getting out of that. It's the kids or isolation. It's the ones that are asymptomatic that we would be trying to use this 10-day down to 7-day protocols for. So.
And I would also add to that, in the next coming weeks, if the CDC then does go out to make a declaration that this one particular test, or if there was a group of tests that they did not approve for this, obviously I think we would pull back from that as well. But at this point, from what I've read, they've approved any and all antigen testing for this shortened quarantine. So.
Okay. Well, thanks for keeping an eye on it. I'll make the motion that we allow the use of these tests.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and I just got a text from Rachel that Zoom has kicked her out. So she sent me her vote. It's not going to be a surprise. But we do have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I think that, and I'm now at this point, I see Rachel's reconnecting. I can understand the concerns, and from what I understand, that while there's the false negative rate, it does appear to detect, or it's more appropriate for how infectious a person is. So even when it is a false negative, the likelihood then in a completely masked environment of spreading that 30% false negative is still relatively low, particularly that late in the contact stage. Is that a fair summary of the situation, Amy?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then is there any other comments or discussions? Okay. All in favor of the motion to allow the rapid test on day 5 through 7 to allow a student being out of quarantine after a minimum of 7 days, correct? You can't get out any sooner than 7 days. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carol, I'm sorry. I only heard Tim's, but I saw your move.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Nay. Abstain? And Jim is not present. So motion passes 3-1. Are there other items for our consideration?
I don't. Go ahead, David.
No, I was just saying that was really our only agenda items today, and that we sent out this information to parents last week of our decreased numbers of active cases in the district, that we're continuing to monitor CDC protocols, and that we would inform them if there was any changes to our protocols. So with this information, we'll start getting all that data out today to begin this process so everybody's informed.
Okay.
Good. I just have one other nice event that we had downtown last Thursday night. Appreciate the district having representation there. I understand that cheerleaders gave us some pep and cheer. Damon, do you want to address any of that?
Yeah, that was great. Our office, Sarah, Amy, and Jamie, and Alyssa Walker from up at the high school, and John Walker and Mark Pierce class put together a pretty neat little formulated light bulb to have a picture opportunity for the parade of lights for the community. And they just did a great job. They met after school and made a neat project so that they could get good photo opportunities for their families. Anybody who came by gave out candy canes, cheerleaders, and Linda was there to kind of pep the the crowd up a little bit, good music, and it was just a really fun event. So we wanted to thank all of those people that helped make that happen. It's just, it's fun. Our people like going out and representing in the district in a positive way. So thanks to them, we had a really neat float to go with it. So thanks for recognizing them.
It was, well, and it was, but it was concerning. It was a social event with a lot of people, and not everybody was adhering to mask guidelines. I think you were singled out, Damon.
Yeah, well, you know, it's an outdoor event. I'm 6 feet away from people, and guidance from the CDC is pretty clear if you're in an outdoor event that you don't have to wear masks. So I can recognize that and experience, you know, I guess did my evaluated my risk and the risk to anybody else. And so I don't know what the point is or what the question is, but I followed CDC guidelines.
Okay. I think that, and I'll let others speak, or we can speak later on, but I think you as our district leader and in the community, even though you know, I would question whether you had that distancing throughout the evening. And I just think that we would ask you to adhere to the same guidelines all the time that we're asking everybody to adhere to, because everybody can make the argument during the school day, and we do give kids breaks and everything, but we really need you to be our leader in that aspect. Just my thoughts.
Other thoughts, comments, which can be shared here or can be shared privately too? Okay. Then if there's no other business, we can adjourn.
Damon?
Thank you.
Hey, it's Jason here. Damon, were we going to ask about some clarification on the masking for kids that are quarantined at practices and games?
Well, yes, if you want to bring that up, we sure can.
Okay. I just want to double check with everyone. Good morning, everybody, by the way.
Good morning, Jason.
I just want to double check, make sure that I'm on the same page and we get everybody on the same page with the in-school quarantine kids only. And currently right now we have 0, which is good. But those kids that are in school and are able to practice and then compete in the activities as well, I want to make sure everybody's on the same page with the mask wearing in heavy, be like a scrimmage in basketball or a game situation. I mean, practices, you know, that's our normal. We'll be as masked up as much as possible there. But I want clarification for game situations. I'm a little uncomfortable if we have a student having them wear a mask during a game. So I just want clarification.
Yeah.
During practice, if a student is in-school quarantine, they can participate in the activity, but they are wearing a mask during practice with maybe very limited exceptions of some type of drill where it just would not work, but very limited exception and as distance as possible from their teammates. That was my interpretation of our decision, but I could be, others could have other interpretations, of course.
That was my interpretation also, Carol, is that, you know, the goal was to keep them up to speed with what's happening in practice and ready to do everything they can when they're finished with that. I think the question about competition is a more difficult one. And it's difficult for this reason and this reason alone. We don't have any control over how Beersford handles their close contacts when they show up in our gym. So they could have a kid that we would say can't be playing or can't be playing without a mask, and they would run up and down our gym breathing all over our players and their own players. My personal preference would be that if we think there is that risk, and this is actually one of the reasons I was asking a little bit about the false positive rate, is I think we could tell that kid, you adhere to this, but if we have a competition, how do we feel about using a rapid test the day of the competition to decide whether or not that student can compete without a mask?
That's something that we had discussed here internally as well. We have that availability. We have the number of tests to do that. So it's something that if you guys desire, we can certainly put that into action, because it's probably going to be a small number of students that would ever be in that situation, hopefully. The other things that I think Jason was probably referring to is the mask mandate during a competition. If that mask were to slide up and injure a student underneath their eyes, or they get injured as a result of wearing a mask during some sort of competitive event, would we be liable for that? So that's kind of the discussion why we needed to have some clarification on that today, just to make sure we're handling it appropriately.
And that's valid concern, but if we don't double check the shoes they're wearing, we're not responsible for a rolled ankle or anything like that. So, I mean, it's protective gear. In a pandemic, their protective gear is additional, so I don't think that's a concern. I don't want anybody to think that we would have liability in that case. And of course, others would make that decision for us. But yeah, I'm comfortable if during competition there's no masking. Keep everybody healthy and eliminate problems. And I think that was my intent. I think I was the one that made the motions, is keep them safe at practice. I don't know, Rachel or Amy, or Jason, if that makes sense. I think what you were saying is to those kids in that situation before competition, before leaving for an out-of-town competition, do you do a rapid test? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Rachel got kicked out again, so I'm texting her
Okay.
this question.
Okay. I mean, not a bad idea, especially if we have the availability.
I feel like, before the vote last time about the sports too, I still think that we should be following the same protocols for our athletes, whether it's a game or whether it's not. But maybe, it can be a situation where they're practicing masked, and we utilize that 7-day, guideline. Maybe they don't play a game during that 7 days of their initial contact. And then we can test them on day 7 and get them off then. I don't know. It's just an idea, but I do worry a little bit about having our students that we have now deemed as close contact. We've allowed them to come to school. We've allowed them to come to practice, all of those things being masked, but now we're allowing them to go and compete with other kids and take their masks off in that time period. It doesn't really sit okay with me, but I think we're kind of past that vote. So I guess to come back to the testing, I feel like, again, we've been given the tests by the state, and it's not gonna, it's going to help us to utilize them in these situations. So if we decide that, in order to allow a student to play it unmasked when we know that they've been in close contact, if we want to, start some sort of a protocol to utilize those tests, I think that would be not difficult to pull off.
So right now, we don't have any students in this category. Is that correct, Jason?
Correct.
Okay. And the reason I asked that is because we have just reduced the length of time that this would adversely hinder their ability to perform or compete. And I wonder whether we should just give that a week, or at least until that December 4th, that next meeting, to see whether or not we really need to make this kind of protocol change. I mean, I'm one for erring on the side of caution without creating too much of a hindrance. And right now, I don't see us having a real need to do this. You know, we are not like the collegiate programs or the professional programs that test daily all athletes. We do want to take a little bit more cautious approach, I think. So how do people feel? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, aside from the change from 14 to 10 and the potential to test out of that down to 7, you really need to let that close contact compete on day 2 without a mask.
And typically, by the time you find out you're a close contact, you're already on day 3 or 4, sometimes 5. So, you know, it might only be you're out for 2 days and you still can practice, but maybe you miss a game, just hypothetically.
Yeah, and Rachel's opinion on this is just no, we don't let them compete without a mask during that period. So I guess that might be her vote. We don't even have a motion yet.
Well, and yeah, so do we need a motion, or does that provide clarification? I guess I can support that, yeah, that not even competition without a mask. So we just needed to provide clarification, or do we actually need a motion?
You know, I think the clarification was there with that discussion, that we would remain with that intent until next Monday's school board meeting on the 14th. We don't have anybody particular into this position at this point anyway. We have activities this week, concerts, and things later in the week that somebody could be involved with, and it could come up. But right now, nobody's in this position, and we could wait to make this discussion part of our COVID discussion on Monday's meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
And please pass on to everyone, the coaches, Amy, the folks that are working with you, that we appreciate the extra work that I know they have to go to, and quite probably, not even probably, I'm certain they put up with a fair amount of grousing and complaining from people who don't like the policies that we put in place all the time. And please let them know that we're not blind to the fact that they do have to enforce these on a day-to-day basis, and that isn't fun, I'm sure. But it is helpful and important.
Thanks for that.
Okay, if there is nothing else.
Motion to adjourn.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. 8:44 a.m. on my computer clock. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Eamon, I will talk to you or see you at 2 o'clock still. Okay,
Yeah, we'll see you then.
very good.
Thanks.
Yep.